Welcome to my video. First, who am I? The answer is, just one of a few robotic voices who will be doing the rounds. But who is the author? Just an ordinary gentleman called Stefan, British-born to parents from the former Yugoslavia. These videos aim to explain subjects of a political theme often discussed in current affairs and in YouTube videos, but rarely precise while always pushing some form of agenda. The giveaway sign of inaccuracy is when one resorts to the common but lazy word, complicated. That region's affairs are virtually always complicated. And why are they complicated? Perhaps because the narrator is not telling the whole story. Perhaps even the so-called experts leave out uncomfortable actualities, which means questions remain unanswered. People with a genuine interest somehow run into a wall. And the only way around it is...
It does, and it doesn't make sense at the same time. It's just complicated, I guess.
Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it isn't. Things could hardly be more straightforward. While most of my videos focus on some element of the former Yugoslavia, some are based away from this region. Now, let me clarify that the author is not a historian, nor a scholar, and does not claim to be qualified in anything that goes out from these videos. He is merely an enthusiast who spends a lot of time and effort deconstructing common narratives. Don't let that put you off, for his message to you is exactly what every professional worth his weight in gold ought to be saying, though few actually will. Don't believe what I tell you. Instead, research for yourself the things you're hearing. And if I've got something wrong, then feel free to collate your own evidence, link it if you can, or if not, just mention it in the comments whereupon the author will happily explore it. Welcome to the last of 3 consecutive recordings which will focus on the Macedonian people for now, as I look to introduce other areas of political life requiring attention after this goes out. So let me summarize the points of the previous 2 presentations. The first focused on the modern-day Macedonian people, the challenges that they have faced, mainly from the Greeks with regard their choice of national name, and from the Bulgarians over their insistence on being a distinct ethnic group. The second video was about the Macedonians' resistance to the unlawful, unconstitutional, unpopular and undemocratic name change for what they believed to be their own country, when the new constitutional name Republic of North Macedonia was forced upon them. We explored not only the backstory of the name change, but the macrocosm over what the new name itself actually symbolized. It merely cemented the nation as a Western outpost which its ruling classes had been aspiring to achieve since independence in September 1991, and moreover, the widening rift between the political elites and the ordinary people, whereby the former exerts not one hint of national consciousness. They do not even pretend to think for themselves. A glaring example of this is not only the regime's drive to lock the nation into trans-North Atlantic economic and security structures, but its readiness to stand by the West on any position. Without question, the second video explored the regime's aggressive promotion of the West's social policy agenda on LGBTQ demands, which the citizens consider to be anathema. Although not mentioned in that video, this goes further. In 2008, the Skopje regime wasted no time in recognizing Kosovo as independent from Serbia following the same action from its Western handlers. In contrast to the majority ethnic Macedonians' views on that subject. While in more recent years, Skopje has joined in the West's chorus of condemnation of Russia, including imposing every sanctions package on Russia without public consultation, nor parliamentary debate. Historically, Moscow had never placed one foot wrong against the Macedonians. From the Russian Orthodox Church's recognition of the Macedonian Orthodox Church, in the face of opposition from the Orthodox churches of Bulgaria and Serbia, to the aid which the city of Skopje received from the Soviet Union following the earthquake of 1963, with Nikita Khrushchev having made a personal visit to Skopje 1 month after the tragedy. On the 4th of August 1992, the Russian Federation became the first major power to recognize the independence of the Republic of Macedonia. While Russia had never asked anything in return of Macedonia, not even that Skopje publicly approved Russia's position on Crimea or South Ossetia and Abkhazia in relation to Georgia. And yet, the Macedonian regime has shamefully rewarded this goodwill by adopting hostile Western postures against a nation who never did them harm, only good. I refer to examples such as Macedonia's approval of UN General Assembly Resolution 68262 in 2014, condemning Russia over Crimea, where Macedonia was one of 100 to raise the hand following instructions from Washington, plus multiple rounds of Skopje, expelling Russian diplomats amid identical circumstances, with so-called North Macedonia having removed 14 by September 2022. Yet if there were any lingering doubt that the Skopje regime might be taking its cues from the West, I invite you to examine the position of the Republic of Macedonia in 2016 over its obstinate refusal to recognize the state of Palestine, whereby Foreign Minister Nikola Popovsky averred that the country's position would be built in accordance with the views of the European Union and its strategic partners. In summary, this is not even a position on Palestine, but a pledge of fealty towards his foreign handlers. The tone of the first video was not so much about opposing Greeks and Bulgarians over their standpoints, but contending that three-way harmony is possible once everybody knows the other's outlook. The second video focused on the total lack of connection between the Macedonian population and their government's Western masters. By contrast to the first video, this scenario truly is 100% irreconcilable, and I make no apologies for my criticism of the West. This presentation focuses on the actual arguments posited by Macedonians as broached in the first video, on matters where they and their Greek and Bulgarian counterparts do not concur. In the first two videos, I steadfastly took the side of the Macedonians regarding their choices. This time, however, the analysis provided will likely favor the Bulgarians and Greeks more than the Macedonians. As said in the first video, the author is someone who has family originating from Macedonia, and identifies those Macedonians as being Slavic. The same video touched on the disagreement between Greeks and Macedonians, whereby the Greeks call out the Slavic language as proof that they are Slavs, while some Macedonians put this down to linguistic assimilation. They argue that the migration of Slavs led to the Macedonian people adopting the language of those Slavs among whom they would live, while maintaining an unbroken sense of identity, thus having existed as Macedonians for an entire millennium and a half. This is not something that I or anyone can disprove. But is it even remotely plausible? Think about it. Original Macedonians, whether Hellenes or not, would have by the 6th century AD been integrated into wider Hellenic society, thereby being literate people. The Greek language was recorded for the time in question. The original Macedonians had the tools to record what was happening in the vicinity, and if indeed any Hellenes were being assimilated by Slavic migrants, written documentation would have recorded this. People writing in Greek could have stated somewhere that their own people are in the process of changing language, while even those to assimilate could have very easily brought forth their writing system and began using it as best they could to replicate phonetically the language they were beginning to speak. Instead of that, we are supposed to believe that with the assimilation came linguistic reset, as Slavic speakers would have to wait until the 9th century before the first script is devised for recording the Slavic language as spoken in the area. I refer to what would be shaped into and become known as the Cyrillic alphabet. Hereinafter, it should be noted that within the country to break away from Yugoslavia in 1991, everything from museum exhibits to school materials give the impression of a Macedonian identity having been present in the region during the Middle Ages and early Ottoman period. This suggests an unbroken historical identity, which in turn facilitates patriotic claims, such as, "We have always been here as Macedonians." But could this terminology simply have been retroactively inserted by somebody? Let's take a more straightforward example. Arabs claim to have existed down the centuries, and their own documents show this to be the case. However, Arabs are also acknowledged in everybody else's archive. So while the chronicles may disagree in interpretation across societies over what is being reported, there is no valid argument to imply that Arabs are some post-20th century newcomers. But what about Macedonians? Such an identity is not found in Ottoman tax registers, or the deftas, as they were known, nor the diplomatic records of the republics of Venice or Dubrovnik, both adjoining the Ottoman Empire for many centuries, and whom the Ottomans trusted as intermediaries in wider Ottoman-Western relations. Nor going back further, Byzantine chronicles, which now push back closer to the time the claimed assimilation is supposed to have happened. Plus, Not even plain traveler accounts or maps published by Arabs, Germans, French, Italians, Russians, and even Chinese describe a Slavic-speaking population, identifying as Macedonian, before the 20th century. So, while Arabs can be found in both internal and external accounts historically, Slavic-speaking Macedonians appear only in their own archives. If you are aware of the several hundred Slav-derived routes to settlements found all over Greece, including the islands, then these merely testify a one-time presence of Slavs, not an ancient Slavic Macedonian existence. So, either the Skopje regime has since independence falsified historical documents, or the rest of the entire world has conspired to erase Slavic Macedonian history. It's up to you regarding what you believe, but for anybody to subscribe to the quote-unquote global conspiracy over a small and insignificant nation, then this is not skepticism, it is paranoia on steroids. Now, let's fast forward to the revolutionary figures of the late 19th and early 20th century period, and in particular, celebrated names in Macedonia such as Gotsei Delchev and Damne Gruev. These names are indeed associated with Macedonian Slavic identity. But before we explore these, let's recall something the author adduced in the first video. Mentioned had been the Encyclopaedia Britannica of 1911, which reported the city of Skopje as having a South Slavic majority, and that these Slavs were a combination of Bulgarians and Serbs. This had indeed characterized the locals of the Vardar region, so come World War II, many from this Vardar region did indeed fight as Chetniks, both inside and outside of the homeland. To clarify, the Chetniks are often reported to have been exclusively Serb, but this is wrong. Most had been Serb, but there had been the other Yugoslav ethnicities as well, but this is a topic for another video. When I say all Yugoslav ethnicities, I didn't mean Macedonian. Suffice it to say that a Chetnik from the Vardar Basin will have exclusively identified as Serb and will have expressly been anti-Macedonian. But focusing on where people did represent a Macedonian ethnicity in the first half of the 20th century, then I regret to inform today's Macedonians that the Macedonia for which Delchev and Gruev fought had been one which was intended to be a subunit of a Bulgarian entity. The revolutionaries of that era who advocated a Macedonia independent of the Ottomans were people who proudly identified as Bulgarian. Just as the Iling-Den uprising of 1903 and the subsequent short-lived Khrushchevska Republic had been the handiwork of Slavs identifying as Bulgarian, along with their Aromanian allies also resident in the town of Kruševo. Although the 2nd of August is a national holiday in Macedonia, just as it is in Bulgaria, the Kruševo Republic was not a precursor to the post-1991 independent Macedonia. Rightly or wrongly, Slavic speakers identify as Macedonian in 3 places, the namesake to break free of Yugoslavia, Greece, and Albania. But sticking to the ex-Yugoslav Republic. When a Macedonian Republic was made part of the framework, just as when, to give another example, Moldova was established within the Soviet Union, the Yugoslav and Soviet governments respectively fostered regional cultural distinctiveness. They did not urge either, or other identical examples, to falsify their own history. The forefathers of the Soviet Union and post-World War II Yugoslavia had never intended that one day, these republics would go independent. Their acceptance was all about managing unity and preventing nationalist uprisings, while also giving such nations room to breathe within the Union. It was never about preparing them for statehood. So with the dismantlement of the Soviet Union and the fragmentation of Yugoslavia, note that I do not use the intellectually dishonest term, collapse, in either category for reasons I will adumbrate on future videos. Various nations suddenly faced a scramble for authenticity. Macedonia may have been the land of some notable figures, but none were historically associated as having a Macedonian identity. As stated earlier, Gotsei Delchev openly identified as Bulgarian. 19th century poet Kosta Abrašević from the lakeside city of Ohrid in southwest Macedonia is on record as being Serb on the father's side and Greek on the mother's, no matter how modern-day Macedonians revise the facts. In contrast to the naming of streets, objects and squares unto historical names related to the Macedonia of antiquity. The notion of having a town named Delchevo in East Macedonia, named after Gotsei Delchev, is perfectly fine, as long as the nation is decent enough to admit that such figures were Bulgarian Macedonian, fighting for a Macedonia to be part of Bulgaria. In 1991, the architects of Macedonia's newfound independence were stranded, historically and politically. And so they creatively and manipulatively responded to this bugbear by rewriting the past. Not only with regard revolutionary figures associated with Bulgaria, but more distant history, whereby they decided that post-1991 Macedonia ought to be successor to the ancient Hellenistic Macedonia. The ruling elites backfilled historical legitimacy, and now Macedonia sells the impression of cultural continuity. But if you honestly believe that today's Macedonians are the children of the antique Macedonians, and that those Macedonians were perennially distinct from Greeks, and that Gotse Delchev is a pure product of this Macedonian bloodline with no connection to Bulgaria, and that Cyril and Methody were Macedonians who devised a script to replace the one they lost 3 centuries earlier, and that Bulgarians are beholden to the Macedonians for using the Macedonian script to write their language, then you're an idiot. No two ways about it. That concludes the third and final video for the series on Macedonians. Next time, I will be focusing on Yugoslavia, its dynamics, and moreover, whether this country really was, quote-unquote, held together by one man, Tito, or is this just another lazy Western narrative which others have learned to accept without question? Keep yourselves well. Until next time.